Hey everybody, DM Jim here, and welcome to another episode of Game Terrain Engineering. Well, I've been busy painting my Star Wars Legion miniatures. I'm going to be playing the Rebels, typically. I'm not painting my Empire troopers yet, but I want to play the Rebels. And I was in the game store last weekend watching a game, Empire versus, the Empire versus the Rebels, and I got into a discussion with some of the guys there. They had a lot of terrain, mainly buildings. They did have some barricades up and stuff like that. And somebody made the comment of, "Oh, look, more buildings," or that wasn't exactly what they said, but they were implying that, another skirmish game with buildings to hide behind and barricades and stuff like that. And it got me thinking that they're right. In most Star Wars movies that we see, anytime there's battles, there's something else that's usually present, and that is ships. So I came home and started doing some digging on thingiverse.com. I'll put a link in the description below. And started finding some interesting files. Now, it does require a 3D printer. Thingiverse allows you to download for free what they call STL files, stereolithography. And these files, you download them for free, and if your printer can handle it, you print them out, and you've got something that you made. There are a lot of Star Wars STL files out there, but a lot of them have problems. Typically, a lot of the ones I'm finding have been scanned, okay, and the scan wasn't 100% because there's like holes in the object or defects. And trust me, that's a surefire way to get your 3D printer, wasting filament, okay? It's also a way to get your slicer program, which basically cuts an object into slices that are printed and built up, so you get this three-dimensional object. So many of these files were corrupted or damaged. I basically started thinking I'm going to have to do a lot of this myself. I would take a file and take what I could from it, and sometimes it was half, sometimes it was only a quarter, and then I would use Tinkercad to recreate the missing parts. It's very time consuming. I spent a lot of time doing this, but the end result, which I'm going to show you in this video how I got there, speaks for itself. So let me show it to you. This is the Y-Wing. What do you think? Scale-wise, it's close. It may be a little off, and here's why. I used some images I found online, and I'll post one here. This one shows Han Solo standing next to the Y-Wing. So seeing that reference in the video, and that's from A New Hope, I used that to enlarge the Y-Wing. This was much smaller. I believe it was about half this size, and I enlarged it. Now what I did was I took the cockpit and the T-body. That part worked, but the engines, the two cylindrical pieces here, they were horrible. They had defects in them, and when you zoomed in real close to them, they were not pixelated, but you could see the polygons, the shapes that made up, like the cylinder head is supposed to be sort of cylindrical, and it wasn't. It had this choppy block to it. So I basically ended up recreating the two engines, the grill, basically every piece on here I had to create from scratch. And it was a learning experience, not for the faint of heart and not for the impatient. But what I ended up with is a roughly scale-sized Y-Wing that can be placed on my Star Wars Legion desktop, tabletop, and it obstructs view. You can hide behind it, but it's not a building. That was the key thing. I'm going to show you some snippets of video of how I got this. One thing I need to tell you, the painting of this, the purple color scheme, I did film it. Something happened to the video and it got corrupted, so I won't be able to show you. I've got some photos, and I'll put those where you can see sort of how I did it. But there is a section of the painting job that didn't happen. I did get some of it, but not all of it. And the part I didn't get, which I'm very frustrated, is this distinct shape on the cockpit that you see in a lot of images of the Y-Wing. So anyway, let me get to some of the videos. I'll do some narration, and I'll tell you how I got this and how I put it together and got it painted, and then I'll have another surprise for you at the end of the video. What you're looking at here is the Y-Wing 3D model without the wings. I got this off of Thingiverse and I used a series of deletions to remove the wings, and then I cut the entire thing in half, as you see here. It's the T-shaped body, and then on the right I had to flip that 180 degrees so that the flat bottom was towards the work plane, so so it would work on my 3D printer. What you're looking at here are just the engine pieces. The tube is hollow on the far right there, the orange tube. And then the other pieces just are little bits and bobs that go inside. The red piece, if you look carefully, is the gun towards the bottom. And then in the background, you'll see the red runner. After I had the files the way I liked them, I just sent them to my 3D printer. Here you can see the main body, and here are the engine tubes. Again, the tubes are hollow, you can't tell but just by looking at it there. And then here are the completed parts that were ready to be glued together. And here is the printed parts, the engine parts that you saw just a few seconds ago. I needed to glue up the engine parts. You can see here I'm using a Dremel, and that was basically, there was a little cylinder that went in the main tube. And it was an exact match, but it was such a tight fit I had to use the Dremel to get it pared down a little bit. And then I basically just used super glue to put everything together. There was a very small cylinder, you can see if you look carefully near my fingers there, that was a spacer. I glued it onto the round piece that goes into the tube, and then I used that spacer to place the tube face down and to get the circle inserted the right distance into the tube. Not sure if that makes sense to you, but if you just watch the video, you'll see that I glued them in. Here I'm gluing the engines onto that little piece that was used as a spacer. It was a 4-fin engine, and I had to do this twice. And I used hot glue here. I'm wishing I had used super glue for this, but I used hot glue and it still sticks, but there was a little squishiness that came out of the edges that I had to get in and carve out with a knife. These are the runners. I printed 2 sets of 4, and you have to cut them out with a knife. Okay, just to get you caught up here, I want to show you everything. Here are the side engines or tubes or whatever. I've glued on the internal manifolds and things like that. These are the end caps. These go right about here. Okay. This part of the engine is exposed. If you look at a picture of a Y-Wing, you'll see what I mean. For lack of a better word, I'm calling these runners. These are the small, thin pieces that will be glued like, I forget how they go. They go like this, and then like that. Okay? There's 4 of them here, and they'll be glued, and they'll expose an area right here. These are very fragile, very thin, but they're pretty strong, at least this part is. I'm gonna have to use a knife to trim these out. I'm worried that if I try to peel this brim off, it'll rip some of it. So I'll just use a knife and score these so I can break them off easier. And then I'll get everything glued up. I didn't film this, I should have. I glued on the front guns here and the top one here. Did those. So all I've got to do is get the engines glued up, get them glued on the side, and then I'll do a few odds and ends with the body and the engines here to give them sort of a patchy, panel-y look, and then I'll get it primed and painted. Here I'm taking the runners that were printed out, 2 sets of 4, and I'm having to use a knife to cut them. They were printed with a brim. You can see that flat piece of plastic that surrounds them, and technically you could just tear that off, but I was worried it might tear the little runners. Gluing up one of the runners on the side of the engine, I looked at some images to sort of get a reference. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this point and that point. So I need to put one in the, they're going to go sort of between it. So, and they start right here on the tip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a drop here and here. And those are gonna go, I gotta be careful here. I want it to be as perfect as I can. I want it between the fins, right there. Here you can see 2 of the runners glued on to the engine. And when all 4 were glued on, they're very strong. You can see them standing here on their own. And then I had to glue that last piece onto the end and attach them to the Y-wing. Okay, so it's time to glue these round pieces onto the ends. There's a couple things you need to know here. One, if you look the side profile, you'll see this fin that sticks out. This fin, according to the screen images I've been able to grab, runs vertically, 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And it has to line up with a fin of one of the engines right here. So I've got to be careful and glue this in like that and line the fin up. Now, it doesn't have to be exact, but I want it to be as close as I can get. The trick is, these are not really, this is a taper to it. I don't know if you can see that. So what I did was I intentionally designed these runners. The end piece here, if you can see it, there's a slight notch in it. I designed that on purpose. It has allowed me to bend this piece in just a little bit without breaking. There's a little piece of plastic that's holding it together, but that bend will give me the angle so that it can be glued on to this taper, all right? So the wings, or the engines, let me say, are extremely delicate to glue on. And the reason being is I'm gluing a curved surface onto a flat surface. Actually, it's sort of a bevel. See that? So what I did was I put some super glue on it and held it for about 2 or 3 minutes, and it's on there now. But there's a gap, a big gap between the wing and the engine. And that's a weak point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that I saw Wylock, I think Wylock mentioned it, which is using baking powder, baking soda, sprinkled onto super glue. So I'm going to do this live here. Let's just take this. This is the bottom, and I don't really care if this messes up the look of it, because this is going to be, on the table, not really visible. So I'm just going to sprinkle some super glue down in there, and take a pinch of soda and sprinkle it in there. Like that. Okay, push it down in there. I'll just tell you there's a chemical reaction going on here that I cannot explain. Maybe my dad could, he's a chemist. I've put the baking soda down in there, and now I'm going to brush it away with a brush. Let's just take a big old one here. And let's see if it actually did. Oh, look at that. There's a nice strong bond there. That is awesome. Before I start priming and painting my Y-wing, I wanted to show you the unfinished version. I'm like a little kid here. I feel like this is the first time I played with an X-wing when I was a kid. Enough said. I love this thing. I give a whole bunch of respect to modelers who do the intricate stuff, ships and anything with a lot of intricate parts, hand cut parts, things like that. This really pushed my patience level. Obviously it showed me that I can do it, but I am loving this. I have a Y-wing for my Star Wars Legion table. It does lack landing gear. I'm going to take care of that. It hasn't been painted or weathered yet, but it's coming. Now, one thing I will show you, if you look, the tubes here, they're very plain. There's not a lot of detail on them. So before I prime this thing, I'm going to find some thin plastic, kind of like the kind you'd find, in a package like this, And I'm going to cut small panels and squares, And I'm going to glue those on in various places. And those are like, the patches that these rebel ships tend to end up with after battles and things like that. Because this thing just looks brand new. It looks really good. But for my purposes, it looks too clean, too polished. It needs some weathering and some damage. So I'm gonna work on that next. Now, if you start looking really carefully at it, you'll notice there are some imperfections. The engines aren't 100% level. This one's a little crooked, not a big deal. Everything looks centered. But again, for the Star Wars Legion table, I just want a ship to put down. Something that's to scale, or roughly to scale. I think this is going to do it. But I'm quite pleased with it, and it's not even painted yet. So let me get the landing gear on, let me get it primed and painted and weathered, and we'll see what it looks like on the table. One of the benefits of having kids who have sort of tired of Lego is you can go pilfer from their Lego collection. I found these pieces, Lego, and they have this circle, and they fit perfectly with my landing gear. I can put this here, there, and there. It doesn't look great, but again, I need it to support the weight of this. So here goes nothing. Here you can see that I'm just gluing on the Lego pieces for the landing gear. I had to get down at eye level with it to look at it from the side to make sure they were centered properly and square with the main body. And after that, I just took it outside and hit it with the white primer. After I primed it with white, it was basically just getting it painted. You can see here I'm painting the cockpit windows. I went back and forth. I ultimately decided on black instead of blue. I wish I could have printed these out with a clear color, but it turned out okay anyway. After that, I just used a lot of different colors of paint. Here I'm painting the whole cockpit sort of a dark gray, and I went over it with a metallic later. I also painted the engines, parts of the engines gray, and then I used a mix of paints like reds and yellows and blues to just touch up some of the details that you can see on the Y-Wing's body. It was just random. Whatever I felt looked good, I would just put a little line of yellow here or a dot of red there. Here you can see the painter's tape I used to get the shape, that traditional shape on the Y-Wing. I did it in purple. It's kind of hard to tell here from the video that it's purple, but it's a vivid purple. And I also did a little ring of purple around the front of the engines, and also that back circle that was painted at the very rear of each of the engines. And that was basically it for the main colors. I mixed up some water and some gray, and I just got it to the depth I like, and then I coated the entire thing in this like dirty gray water, and it really took the bright white primer and toned it down and gave it this really aged and used look that just fit perfect with the Y-Wing. So that is how I created in quotes, because I didn't do all of it. That's how I made this Y-Wing. It is a fully 3D printed object, rescaled to size, and glued together. Most of it was individual pieces that I did, and then I painted it and gave it a wash to give it that weathered look, and I'm very pleased with it. One thing I should point out, landing gear. Couldn't really find a good image of Y-Wing landing gear, so I did what any good prototyper will do. I rated my kids' Legos, and if you look real carefully, those are Lego pieces. They are glued on for the landing gear. Thank you, boys, for sacrificing a few pieces of your Lego for Dad's Y-Wing. I mentioned a surprise. If you paid attention to the scroll at the beginning of the video, it mentioned 2 used vehicles, right? I did the Y-Wing. I also did the A-Wing. I'm not happy with A-Wing, and I'll tell you why. This one was the first one I did, or first one I assembled and painted, because it doesn't have as many parts as the Y-Wing. It's got a brownish color to it. I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. I may repaint. This is a wash that I put on it. I'll put some close-up photos of these so you can see the end result. I may go back and repaint the brown areas white and then give it a different type of wash. I did two different things here. This one was a very blinding white primer, and I mixed up some gray paint and dirty, water to create a dirty water, and I coated this thing, and it really dulled that white down and gave it a used look, but it's still white. This one, I don't know, not really like digging the brown, stains on the body. It looks great in person. It's to scale compared, to the Y-wing here, but gonna repaint it, I think, and not today, because I'm going to try to get a Star Wars Legion game in very soon, and hopefully my opponent's not watching this video because I want these to be a surprise. So anyway, 2 vehicles. Am I done? I have got some other ideas. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Yes, I plan on doing an X-Wing. I know that's the traditional Star Wars vehicle. That one's tricky. The guns on it are very thin. There's some other issues with it that I'm trying to work out. The other thing is finding a really good detailed model that's worth the time to slice it and repair those things that may not print out very well. Total time on the A-Wing, I spent quite 2 or 3 hours just cleaning up the body. The Y-Wing, easily 5-6 hours, and that's not counting print time. Print time on the Y-Wing, I should have added it up. It was definitely close to like maybe 10 hours, 12 hours, somewhere around there. The A-Wing, about half that, maybe 5 to 6 hours. So, and that was printing with what they call, or for me, it was the fine resolution for a lot of the parts. On some of it I didn't care, but on a lot of it I wanted fine resolution, which slows the 3D printer, 3D printing down. So I hope you like these. I'm really happy with them. They are not movie accurate at all. There are some major differences. If you look at these carefully and compare them to images from the movie, they are different. Some of that I did on my own to make sure that they are not, 100%, Disney or Lucasfilm models. They're slightly different in some ways, but the overall shape, definitely for a Star Wars fan or a Star Wars Legion player, the overall shape and look of it, you'll know what it is immediately. So anyway, if you have any questions for me, post them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer. Will I be printing more Y-Wings and A-Wings? Probably. It's a very tedious process, but I can't just stop at one. So I could see myself building, recreating the scene in A New Hope with all the vehicles in the pyramid, right before the attack on the Death Star. I could see that. That might be fun. But anyway, A-Wing and Y-Wing, and yes, I have some other vehicles planned for the near future, so keep an eye out for those. This is DM Jim, and I will see you in the next episode.